the fascinating world of overlocking. You chose Bernette, and we want you to make the most of Bernette's versatility. The Bernette overlockers range from the 303 3-thread model to the 334, a 3-4 thread model with or without differential feed, up to the 5-thread model, the 335. 2 knives cut off the fabric edges, giving the inside of clothes a perfect, neat finish. An overlock stitch is a loop formed by the looper and the needle threads, which produces a chain. The 3 elements, loopers, needles, and knives, work together to cut, sew, and neaten. Bernette overlockers, including the new Fun Locks, are the ideal addition to sewing machines for a truly professional finish. The Bernette 303 has 1 needle and 2 looper threads to produce a 3-thread overlock, which is mainly used for neatening. The 334, with or without differential feed, works with 2 needles and 2 loopers to produce a 4-thread overlock with integrated safety seam. It's primarily used for sewing together stretch and knits. This very versatile machine can also be used with 1 needle to produce a 3-thread overlock for neatening. The 5-thread overlocker is ideal for the professional or semi-professional sewer. The stitch formation is made up of a double chain stitch combined with a 3-thread overlock, both of which can be used independently. The chain stitch can be used for decorative purposes. The 5-thread overlocker is mainly used for woven fabrics. All Bernette overlockers are compact and easy to carry. All controls are placed on the right-hand side. For roll hemming, just flick the lever and sew. Accessories for your Bernette are conveniently stored inside the looper cover. A colored threading illustration makes it easy to thread your overlocker. The unique Bernette design makes them the easiest overlockers to use, as we will show you step by step. To prepare for sewing, first plug the machine in. The foot control regulates the sewing speed from slow to maximum. Raise the support rod and turn until the catches engage. Place thread cones in position. All types of cones, household or industrial, can be used on the Bernette overlocker. For larger cones, turn the anti-vibration cones upside down. When sewing with normal household spools, remove the anti-vibration cones, place them inside one another for storage, place spools on spool holders, and place the spool caps on the top with the rounded side underneath. For neat and tidy sewing, place the waste collector in front of the looper cover. Switch the power and light on. The hand wheel turns forward as on a household sewing machine. Open the looper cover by pushing to the right. Close by pushing upwards until it clicks into place. Open the cloth plate by pushing to the left. Push it closed until it clicks into place. Raise the presser foot by lifting the presser foot lifter. Raise it again for easy insertion of thick fabrics. To swing out the unique presser foot on the 303, 334, or 334D, raise the needles, raise the presser foot, and swing it out. To change the presser foot, raise the needles, then the foot. Press the catch to release the presser foot sole. Slide the replacement foot sole so that the groove lines up with the presser foot pin. Lower the shank, and the presser foot will engage automatically. To raise the knife, open the looper cover, press to the right, and turn upwards as far as it goes. All Bernette overlockers use household needles. They must always be inserted with the flat side to the back. Swing presser foot out, insert the right needle first, Tighten needle clamp slightly, then insert the left needle. Use either the tweezers or the clever new Bernette needle inserter. Make sure that both needles are inserted as far as possible, and then tighten both needle clamp screws firmly and swing foot back into position. To thread your overlocker, just follow the illustration and start with the upper looper thread. Following the blue markings, take the thread through the blue guide. Make an S loop around the thread guide bar. Take thread round the tension dial and pull slightly to make sure the thread is between the tension discs. Take the thread through the blue open thread guides. Hold it with the tweezers and place the thread in the last guide before the looper eye. Double the thread and twist it. Swing the presser foot out and thread through the looper eye. Pull thread through. Lay it under the presser foot, swing presser foot back, and lower it. Now thread the lower looper, following the red markings. Bring thread up from the spool and take it through the red guide. Make an S loop around the thread guide bar and then thread the tension dial, pulling slightly to check that it's between the tension discs. Continue, slipping it into the red thread guides. Open the cloth plate, remove the looper threader, and using the threader, bring the thread through from the right to the left side of the machine. Turn hand wheel until the lower looper is in the leftmost position. Slip thread into slit on the looper. Pull on the thread end to the right and pull through. Take thread out of threader. Turn hand wheel until the loopers nearly cross over and thread the looper eye. Place thread under the presser foot. Lower it. Pull slightly and check that the lower looper thread is on top of the upper looper thread. Now thread the right needle. Bring thread up from the spool and take it through the green guide. Make an S loop around the thread guide bar and then take thread round the tension dial, again checking that it's between the thread tension discs. Continue threading the green thread guides. Turn hand wheel towards you to raise the needles. Raise and swing out the presser foot and thread the right needle, using the tweezers to pull the thread through, and place thread underneath foot. Swing presser foot back and lower it. Thread the left needle in the same way following the yellow markings. Make an S loop round the thread guide bar. Take it through the yellow thread guides. Raise the needles, raise and swing out the presser foot, thread the left-hand needle and place thread underneath. Swing presser foot back and lower it. To rethread the machine with different thread, simply cut off existing thread above the spools, not new thread to old. Cut needle threads just in front of the needles and set tension dials at 0. Then pull looper threads through first, then the needle threads. Then rethread needles and reset tensions to original positions. Now make a sewing test. Set all tension dials to 5. Raise the presser foot with your thumb. Position the fabric under the foot up to the knife so that 1/4 inch of fabric is cut off while sewing. Continue sewing to form a chain and cut chain off on the thread cutter. You can also continue until a longer chain is formed. Then pull gently round to the front and cut the thread chain off with the knife. Use double layer for sewing test. Check your sewing test. The lower looper thread lies on the underside. The upper looper thread on the upper side of the fabric, and both loops should meet exactly on the edge of the fabric. Both needle threads appear as straight stitches. Pull slightly and you will see what a beautiful seam your Bernette makes. For a narrow 3-thread overlock, remove the left needle and the left needle thread. For a wider 3-thread overlock, remove the right needle and the right needle thread. The 4-thread overlock is ideal for sewing together all types of stretch or jersey fabrics, the universal stitch for any type of leisure wear. The narrow 3-thread overlock is perfect for neatening seam allowances and narrow seams in fine knits, and for roll hemming. The wide 3-thread overlock is ideal for neatening edges of loosely woven, thicker fabrics. The 334D and the 335 are both equipped with differential feed. It can be used together with all stitch types to produce perfectly flat and non-wave seams in all stretch and knit fabrics. The differential feed, ideally placed on the right-hand side, is quickly and easily adjusted while sewing. The stitch length dial, just above the differential feed knob, can also be adjusted while sewing, from satin stitch to 4 millimeters. The cutting width knob moves the position of the lower knife. As soon as the upper knife is lowered, it adjusts itself automatically to the position of the lower knife. If the thread loops are too loose, the cutting width should be increased to a higher value. If the fabric curls in the stitch, the cutting width should be reduced. To thread the Bernette 335 for chain stitching, turn the hand wheel until the upper looper is in its lowest position. Press the lever to release the looper. Turn the hand wheel to check that the upper looper does not move. Open the cloth plate. Bring the thread up from the spool and take it through the purple guide, through the thread guide on the support rod, and down to the guide at the bottom back of the machine. In through the next guide, and then around the thread tension. Take the thread through the long slot and into the last thread guide. Turn the hand wheel forwards until the chain looper is in the leftmost position. Lay the thread in the slit on the looper from back to front. Use the looper threader to bring the thread through to the right side. Turn the hand wheel forward until the looper is in the rightmost position. Double the thread and twist, and thread the chain looper. Pull the thread through with the tweezers and cut so that about 2 inches remain hanging free. Now thread the chain stitch needle. Bring the thread up and take it through the yellow guide. Make an S-loop around the thread bar and take the thread around the tension dial, pulling slightly to check that it's in between the tension discs. Take the thread up and through the take-up, through the next guide, and then thread the needle. Place the thread over the presser foot to the left side. For a chain stitch, remove the knife guide and attach the special guide plate. Make a sewing test. Raise the presser foot and position the fabric under the needle so that the needle goes into the fabric as soon as sewing is started. Continue sewing over the end of the seam, forming a thread chain. Cut the thread chain on the thread cutter or with a scissors. For the next seam, just lift the presser foot with your thumb and start sewing. Your Bernette overlocker requires very little maintenance. For all maintenance work, first unplug the machine. To clean and lubricate, open the looper cover and remove the dust and fluff with the brush provided. Lubricate the 2 points indicated in the instruction manual. To change the lower knife, raise the needles and the upper knife. Use the large screwdriver to loosen the set screw on the lower knife retaining plate and remove the knife. Fit the replacement knife into the groove so that the sharp edge is in line with the stitch plate and retighten the set screw. To replace the bulb, simply unscrew and screw in the new one. After the basics of overlocking, here are some of Bernette's special applications. They are not only practical, but also decorative and very attractive. One of the most useful stitches on an overlocker is roll hemming. And on the Bernette, it's so simple. The machine should be threaded for a narrow 3-thread overlock with the right needle. Pull the lever back, reduce the cutting width to between 1 and 1.5. Reduce upper looper tension and increase lower looper tension. Make a sewing test and adjust the stitch length while sewing to get the desired effect. Stitch length is normally between 1 and 1.5. Roll hemming is ideal for finishing edges on all articles made from fine fabrics. The roll hemmer can also be used for narrow seams and makes lovely pin tucks. Fold the fabric and press the fold. Guide the fabric along the right-hand marking on the presser foot and sew along the fold without cutting. Use normal tension settings for pin tucking and set the stitch length to between 1.5 and 2. For sewing in lace, use the same tension and stitch length settings as for pin tucking. Place the fabric right sides together with the edge of the fabric protruding slightly. Sew, guiding the edge of the lace along the right-hand marking on the presser foot so that the lace is not cut. Only the raw edge of the fabric is cut away. Open out the lace. This is the right side. To sew on the next piece of fabric, place right sides together with fabric edge protruding slightly. Sew the next seam in the same way. To sew lace together, place the pieces right sides together. Guide along the right-hand marking on the presser foot and sew without cutting. Reduce needle thread tension to 0. Open out the lace. As the needle tension was reduced to 0, you can pull the seam open gently for a practically invisible flat joining seam. The joined lace pieces can now be sewn onto fabric, with the needle thread tension set back to normal, around 5. Sew, cutting off the raw edge of the fabric. You can make really beautiful items on your Bernette overlocker using pin tucking and lace insertion. Gathering is simple, using the differential feed adjusted to a maximum setting of 2 and a stitch length of 3 to 4 and cutting width of 1 to 2. The machine is set up for 4-thread overlocking, tension settings normal. Place a single layer of fabric under the presser foot and sew slowly, letting the fabric feed loosely and not holding it back. Now join the gathered section to a flat piece of fabric. Place fabric right sides together. Adjust differential feed to normal, stitch length to 2.5. Sew over the gathered edge, cutting off the raw edge of the flat piece of fabric only. What a pretty frill! Flat locking gives you a lovely decorative effect. Set the machine for 3-thread overlocking with left needle. Use normal sewing thread in the needle and lower looper and a decorative thread such as cordonnet, buttonhole twist or pearl yarn in the upper looper. Adjust tension. Loosen needle thread tension fully, reduce upper looper tension to between 0 and 2, and increase lower looper tension to between 6 and 9. Place fabric wrong sides together and sew, holding the thread for a few stitches. You can also sew flat lock along the fabric fold without cutting. Pull the seams apart and you'll have a perfect flat lock. The first seam is a decorative joining seam and the second is purely decorative without joining. Flat joining is perfect for patchwork. Turn under 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on both fabric pieces. Place wrong sides together and sew along the folded edges without cutting. Pull the seams gently apart and press open the seam allowances. Strips or squares of fabric can be joined in this way to produce beautiful patchwork. Lettuce edging is another very decorative element. Cut a stretch fabric across the knit. Set the machine and tensions for roll hemming and adjust differential feed to 0.7. While sewing, pull gently on the fabric so that the edge curls. For a curlier edge, stretch the seam slightly. Spaghetti straps are very easy to sew. Set the machine for normal overlocking. Form a thread chain slightly longer than the spaghetti strap. Place the thread chain along the fabric and fold the fabric over the thread. Sew the seam, checking that the thread chain in between the fabric does not get cut. Pull on the thread chain to turn the spaghetti strap to the right side. Optional accessories are available for your Bernette overlocker to make sewing even easier. The blind stitch foot sews, trims, and neatens hems in stretch or knit fabrics in one easy go. Attach the foot and set the machine for 3-thread overlocking with the right-hand needle. The guide on the foot can be adjusted to sew an invisible hem in stretch or knit fabrics. For fine fabrics, move the guide closer to the needles, and for heavier fabrics, move the guide away. Adjust tension. Turn up hem and press. Fold under the hem section. Position the hem under the presser foot, adjusting the guide so that the needle just catches the fabric fold. Sew, cutting off the excess fabric. For a mock blind hem, ideal for very fine jerseys, adjust tension and stitch length to normal settings. Set the blade on the foot further to the right so that the needle goes into the fold of the fabric. Another variation is the flat-locked blind hem. Adjust stitch length to between 2.5 and 4 and use flat-lock tension settings. These are the 3 blind hem variations. The normal for medium to heavier weight knits, the mock blind hem for visible hems in fine jerseys, and the flat-lock blind hem, giving you an attractive decorative hem. Another useful accessory is the cording foot. It has a guide for sewing in special threads. Attach the foot and set the machine for roll hemming. Cutting width to 1. Stitch length to about 1.5 to 2, and needle thread tension to 0. Place spool of pearl yarn on the spool holder and take it through the thread guide on the support rod directly to the guide near the sewing light. Take it under the foot, slip into the rear guide, and then into the front guide on the foot. Fold fabric right sides together and sew along the edges without cutting, sewing in the pearl yarn at the same time. The second variation is sewing with fishing line, which is sewn in along the edge of fabric that has been cut on the bias. The fishing line should be no thicker than 0.7 millimeters. Set the machine for roll hemming. Stitch length 1 to 1.5 and cutting width about 1 to 1.5, and increase lower looper thread tension to between 6 and 9. Before starting to sew, pull fishing line out behind the presser foot and hold it when starting to sew. Cut threads and fishing line, leaving a length of about 10 inches. Pull the pearl yarn to gather until the desired amount of gather is achieved. Then gently stretch the roll-hemmed edge to pull in the fishing line, which gives you a beautiful wavy edge. Another variation is sewn with elastic. Thread the same way as before. Fold the fabric right sides together and sew, without cutting, at the same time sewing in the elastic. Pull the seam apart gently. Pull the elastic until the desired amount of gather is achieved. With the elasticator, you can sew on elastic from 5 to 12 millimeters in width. Set the machine for 4-thread overlocking and set the stitch length to 4 and increase pressure foot pressure to maximum. Raise the presser foot and the roller on the foot. Insert the elastic into the slit on the foot. Sew a few stitches until the elastic moves over to the right side of the foot. Lower the roller and adjust the guide to the width of the elastic. Then sew a few more stitches. Place the fabric with the wrong side uppermost and adjust the pressure to suit your needs. Watch the fabric feed and let the machine take up the elastic slowly. This foot is ideal for sewing elastic onto gymnastic clothes, swimwear, or lingerie. For a perfect finish, turn the elastic under and sew from the right side with your Bernina sewing machine. You can also sew on decorative elastic. Sew elastic on with the straight edge to the right, fabric right side uppermost. Turn and sew from the right with your sewing machine for a pretty finish. You can also sew on lace and elastic together. Place the lace and the fabric, right sides together, and sew cutting off the edge of the fabric. The elasticator feeds the elastic without you having to hold or to watch it. You can concentrate fully on the fabric and the lace. Finish with the sewing machine for a lovely, decorative edge. Another Bernette advantage is the tape guide on the normal presser foot. Set the machine for 4-thread overlocking. Swing the foot out, insert the tape, swing the foot back, and sew a few stitches on the tape. Then adjust the tape guide so that the right needle goes into the tape. Place the fabric under the tape and sew. This is ideal for stabilizing cross seams, especially in jerseys or hand knits. You can decorate a ribbon with a flat lock seam. Use 3-thread overlocking with the left needle. Set tensions for flat locking. Adjust the guide so that the needle does not sew into the ribbon. A delightful effect when sewn onto children's clothes. A strip of sequins can be sewn onto fabric. Use transparent thread in the upper looper and sew along the folded edge of the fabric, making sure that you sew with the sequins and not against them, so that they don't stand up while sewing. Sew, making sure not to cut the sequins. Pull the seams open. You see, pretty effects can easily be realized with decorative bands and sequins. You can oversew several ribbons with normal thread tension and then braid them or sew them individually onto clothes with the sewing machine for an unusual but very attractive look. Many different types of thread can be used in the loopers of your Bernette. Wool and narrow ribbons can be used in the upper looper. Wind them onto cones for easier feed. When thick threads are threaded onto the machine, it's often better not to thread them round the tension dial or through the last thread guide before the upper looper. For heavy threads, use stitch length of between 3 and 4. Pearl yarn, baby wool, candlelight metallic, and woolly nylon can be used in either the upper looper alone or in both loopers. Threading is the same as for normal threads, but use slightly looser tensions. Do not necessarily thread the last thread guide. Stitch length can be adjusted to 2 and 4. The result of threading both loopers with special threads is an attractive, reversible stitch. Very fine threads like silky polyester, metallic, or coordonnée can be used in both loopers. Combined with a very short stitch length, they produce a lovely satin stitch. With the choice of threads available and Bernette's capabilities, a multitude of decorative effects on clothing, craft items, and home furnishings can be achieved. Fringing is very easy to do with your Bernette. Set the machine for 3-thread overlocking with the left needle and tensions for flat lock. Measure the length of the fringe wanted and pull a thread at this distance from the edge. Fold over where the thread was pulled. Sew flat lock along the right side of the fold. Pull the flat lock gently open. Then pull the threads up to the flat lock to make the fringe. You can then knot it to obtain this unusual effect. Sewing with the Bernette overlocker is quick and easy. In no time at all, our special professional tips will turn you into an overlock expert. To secure seams, sew a few stitches until the needle just goes into the fabric, and then use the hand wheel to put the needle into the fabric. Raise the presser foot, fold the thread chain back onto the fabric under the foot. Lower the foot and sew over the chain, cutting off the excess with the knife. Sew to the end of the seam, leaving the needle just in the fabric. Raise the foot, turn the fabric over towards you under the foot. Lower the foot and sew over the seam slowly without cutting. Raise the needle and foot, turn the fabric to the side, lower the foot and sew to form a chain, then cut. Or you can form a chain at the beginning and end of the seam and pull it through the stitches with a darning needle. To unpick seams, use your Bernina seam ripper or small scissors to cut the loops and then pull on the needle thread. To mend a seam, raise needles and presser foot and insert fabric at the seam break. Sew a few stitches over the seam and continue sewing without cutting the edge of the fabric. Most commercial pattern companies produce special overlocking patterns, but many regular patterns can be used with Bernette. When selecting a pattern, choose simple styles which are loose-fitting and which can be sewn, if possible, without zips or buttons. You can always use Velcro or snap fasteners for really easy results. Cut out according to manufacturer's instructions. The advantage of overlocking is that the knives cut away the raw edges. So when overlocking, cut off the surplus seam allowance so that the seam comes along the sewing line of the pattern. For really exact work, you can mark the sewing lines with tailor's chalk. After some practice on your Bernette, you'll find pinning together is unnecessary. However, if you want to pin together, or if the pieces are fiddly, pin together with the pins parallel and about an inch from the fabric edge. Sew so that the left needle sews into the marked line and remove the pins in front of the foot. Whatever you are sewing, you will have to sew a curve. To sew an outside curve, sew slowly and try to feed the fabric in a straight line into the machine. For inside curves, sew until you reach the curve and then straighten out the curve and continue sewing so that an even amount is cut off the edge of the fabric. If you want a perfect corner, for example on a placemat or a tablecloth, make a snip in the corner exactly along what will be the cutting line. Sew up to the corner, raise the needles and presser foot, push the roll hemming lever back to roll hemming. Turn the fabric so that the snipped fabric edge is in line with the knife and the needle goes into the fabric just below the existing stitch. Push roll hemming lever back to overlocking and continue. A perfect corner. To neaten the edges of inside corners, snip into the corner. Sew up to the corner, straighten out the fabric, and fold over the excess fabric towards you and sew into the corner. Once in the corner, turn excess fabric away from you and continue sewing. For sewing crossed seams, such as crotch or underarm seams, match seam lines and press the lower seam towards you and the upper seam away from you and sew. One of the easiest and nicest ways to finish casual wear is with ribbing. Mark the ribbing and the lower edge of the garment into 4 equal sections with pins. Matching up the pins, pin ribbing to the lower edge, sticking the pins into the ribbing. To start sewing in a circle, cut away a small rectangle of fabric. Raise needles and presser foot and position the work under the foot so that the knife is in line with the cut section. Always use differential feed on 2 when applying ribbing and attach the seam guide and adjust to the width of the ribbing. Stretch the ribbing while sewing. At the end of the seam, sew over the existing stitches, cutting off the thread chain. Sew about 1 to 2 inches further over the existing stitches without cutting. Raise the needles and presser foot, turn the work to the side, and sew away from the seam. If you buy a finished ribbing, sew it on in the same way but without cutting off the edge of the ribbing. Guide the edge of the ribbing along the right-hand marking on the presser foot. To make a waistband casing, cut the waistband to the width of the lower edge. Fold in half and sew on as for ribbing without stretching, leaving a small opening to insert the elastic. Insert the elastic and sew over the opening without cutting. Our overlock sweatshirt is now complete. You can use your Bernette for all seams, sewing on the ribbing and neckband and making a flat seam with decorative thread. A complete garment in no time at all.